So the internet has been in agreement lately that Disney musicals aren't quite what they used to be. While there was something stellar like Encanto a couple of years ago, which no notes at all, the negative reception to the music in Wish and Moana 2, as well as the updated songs in the Snow White remake, indicates that the Disney musical is officially in a slump period. And while the movies that made up the revival era, like The Princess and the Frog and Frozen, had some good songs, one of which was a minor crossover hit, I find myself appreciating the musicals that made up the Renaissance more and more. And this isn't just nostalgia. For example, I was never that nostalgic about Beauty and the Beast, but now I consider it a 10 out of 10.
You came back.
Animated films, and especially animated musicals, were just made differently back then, and much better at that. If you want to properly go in depth as to why the creative process at Disney has changed for the worse, check out this excellent video by our saviour, Calaxin Cares Too Much. But today, I'm going to talk about my number 2 favourite Disney movie of all time. And since my number 1 is Sleeping Beauty, and we can't really call that a typical musical in the way the Renaissance films and revival ones were, I guess this also holds the title of being my favourite Disney musical. And we're also celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. The music of Pocahontas was done by Alan Menken, as were most of the Renaissance musicals. Howard Ashman was supposed to be the lyricist here as well, but of course, he sadly passed away while working on Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, and Tim Rice replaced him on Aladdin and then moved on to do work on The Lion King, which was in production at the same time. The lyrics here were written by Stephen Schwartz, who everyone was already a big fan of and had actually quit musical theatre and was studying psychology when Disney contacted him. Him and Alan Menken would also collaborate to write the music for The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and yes, all hail to those two, even if A Guy Like You gives us pause. They were going to write the songs for Tangled as well, but Stephen Schwartz dropped out after being disrespected by the Pixar tech bros that were now running the studio, but that's a rant for another day. He also wrote the songs for The Prince of Egypt, which I cannot put into coherent words about the levels of iconic. Lindsay Ellis will not like this video. And then of course we can thank him for... So considering the talent involved, it's unsurprising that this ended up as my favourite Disney musical. Our first song is The Virginia Company, setting the scene as a crew of settlers prepare to leave London for a voyage to the New World. This song is what we would call non-diegetic, and in terms of a musical is not being sung on screen for the other characters to hear. And this is deliberate because The Virginia Company is a propaganda song. We are being put in the perspective of average English society in the year 1607, where these voyages to the New World are being hyped up as glorious and adventurous, in search of treasure and doing God's work. In fact, the lyrics repeat the phrase, glory, God and gold, which is a common shorthand used by historians to describe the motives behind all these overseas voyages, though they say it in the order gold, God and glory, which is obviously changed to fit the meter. Gold doesn't refer to literal gold mined from the ground as in the movie, but rather the money they would get from trade such as tobacco, spices and... God is of course referring to the spreading of Christianity, and Governor Radcliffe later refers to the Powhatans as heathens because they aren't Christian, thus allowing him to dehumanize them and encouraging the others to do the same. And glory isn't just about making it into the history books, because these European nations were in competition with each other, and laying claim to a newly discovered country strengthened your position in European politics. And these settlers aren't just in it for personal glory, they're taught to believe that they're doing something grand for England itself. So it's not plundering another country to line your own pockets, it's an act of patriotism as well as God's work, so aren't you heroic? And this song is non-diegetic to show how this belief is internalized by English society. They're not singing about their feelings or how they wish the world would be, because this is the status quo, and in their minds it need not be changed. And superficially, the lyrics are Tiana's kiss. And the drum introduction makes this a real call to adventure. Join the cause, do something noble for your country. And there's some confusion over the line, but every transcription has Winnie being capitalized, meaning it's referring to a person, and basically another part of the propaganda is the men telling themselves that they're helping secure a comfortable future for their wives as well. And while Winnie was likely just picked because it rhymes with Virginie, the name it's short for, Winifred, also means blessed peacemaking, which is nice and ironic. When the song ends, we immediately go into a storm at sea, in which Thomas nearly drowns and John rescues him. The next piece is a separate song on the soundtrack, so I'm going to count it as a reprise of the Virginia Company rather than part of the same song, and here we see the men themselves start singing diegetically, though more as a sea shanty to get their morale up after nearly dying. And Stephen Schwartz studied sea shanties to get inspiration on how the English would be represented musically, and they make light of the fact that they're going to be killing the indigenous people once they get to the New World. And this was actually a selling point for Russell Means, who voiced Chief Powhatan, as the movie was spelling it out that the settlers came over to plunder the resources and kill anyone who got in their way.
I'm gonna get a pile of gold, build me a big house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
Now John and Thomas start the song with the others, but then drift off to their own separate conversation as an early indicator that they'll have their face turns later, and this segues into the same chorus that started the movie, reaffirming the collectivist way of thinking, but also having some of the main characters disconnected from it. And then we get into my second favourite song in the whole movie, and actually the first song from a musical that I ever added to my iPod back in the before times, Steady as the Beating Drum. Like the Virginia Company, this is a non-diegetic number to establish the setting, but the difference is that the former was very much collectivist, with no room for individuality, and there to give the audience a sense of how artificial it is, creating the illusion of a sense of community. But here we have genuine community. The voices in the Virginia Company were all uniform, as if it's the same person being cloned, because individual thoughts come second to the wishes of the king. But in Steady as the Beating Drum, we can hear multiple voices in the chorus, and the song gives prominence to all of them at different points.
Bring the corn and bear the food.
Like here, we get a chorus of only female voices, and then that's joined by male voices as the warriors return home.
By the water, Stephen Lee.
There's also a warmth in the song that isn't there in the Virginia Company to show that this is a happy, functioning community where everyone has their part to play, and shame on you Brits for coming along and ruining that. And the phrase, steady as the beating drum, is structured to evoke a heartbeat, with the music incorporating drumming and chanting to evoke traditional Indigenous music. The chant at the beginning of the song is Algonquian, and while Stephen Schwartz can't remember exactly, it was likely a combination of several chants he found while doing his research. And the way the chorus swells as Chief Powhatan appears,
Steady as the beating drum.
It is so good. But also notice that the main character isn't part of the song, because she'll later be established to be a bit apart from the rest of the tribe, and trying to work out what her own path is. Unlike the Virginia Company, Steady as the Beating Drum gets a short reprise later, this one being a private song sung by Chief Powhatan to his daughter. Russell Means' singing is dubbed by Jim Cummings, who was the voice of your childhood if you were born after 1980, and he matches the voice very well.
He will choose the smoothest course.
And out of all the princess films, this is the first one where the father sings to his daughter, and this is a short one, at barely 30 seconds, but it represents one character making a pledge to another, which Pocahontas will take to heart. She doesn't join in the song though, because she and her father are currently at differing perspectives, but the song parallels life to a river's course, with Chief Powhatan saying this,
They're steady.
and she continues that theme as we go into the next song.
But it's not steady at all.
Just Around the River Bend is probably the second most famous song from the movie, and it's the standard Disney I Want song, where the protagonist sings about their innermost thoughts, feelings, and desires. It's also been the target of undeserved ridicule, where people make fun of it for not being clear on what Pocahontas wants, as opposed to Part of Your World, where Ariel obviously wants to join the human world, or the reprise of Belle, where Belle expresses her desire for adventure. But Pocahontas was intended to be very different from them, and indeed Jasmine in terms of characterization.
Pocahontas is more of a woman instead of a teenager.
Those three were all coming-of-age ladies, and what they're looking for is a sense of identity, all of which is tied to not being fully accepted or understood in their communities. And they either need to change their surroundings, or something external in their surroundings has to change in order for the central conflict to be resolved. Ariel doesn't just need to become human, or be with Eric, but also for her father to understand why that is the best ending for her. Belle doesn't just need to leave the poor provincial town where she's shunned for being odd, but to have both someone who loves her and a community where she and her father are accepted. Pocahontas, meanwhile, was intended to be maturer and more of a grown woman than her predecessors, so she has already found her sense of identity and is confident and sure of herself, So her conflict is in what to do with her identity and how best she can serve the people around her. And she's also been getting a dream that tells her something is about to happen. So when her father tells her that something is as mundane as marrying Kocoum, the conflict is between following her father's wishes at the expense of her own feelings and following her heart, which could have the consequence of ruining the relationship between them. Klaxon outlined the pillars of a Disney I Want song in this video, which I would really recommend checking out. And the first thing to note is that Disney movies are supposed to be driven by a sense of unfairness, like Ariel's beloved father demonizing the one thing that brings her joy, or Belle being ostracized by her town for preferring books, and the I Want song then cultivates empathy for the protagonist. Here the unfairness is that Pocahontas may have to marry a man she doesn't like to please her father, and we already know that there's an approaching ship on the way with English settlers who are upfront that they'll be killing anyone who tries to stop them. So an I Want song asks what is standing in the character's way, and the film's antagonists usually foster that. And the film will have a main villain to generate the majority of the conflict, and also a secondary obstacle, such as Triton not understanding Ariel, or the Sultan pressuring Jasmine to get married. In this case, Chief Powhatan is the secondary obstacle, who has laid down the conflict in the previous song, and this will create more conflict once Pocahontas falls in love with John, as she isn't just falling for a strange foreigner they don't trust, but also while her father has promised her to someone else. Pocahontas respects her father and wants to do right by him, but she also can't go against her own heart, which the song helps her realize. Her father had paralleled his plan for her to the river, saying the river is X and so you should be too. Pocahontas begins the song, however, realizing that the river is Y actually. The river isn't steady, it's wild and unpredictable, just like life is, and that's how she likes it. So by marrying Kocoum and buying into her father's metaphor, she would be ignoring the way the river actually is, and by extension her own nature to make other people happy. Throughout the song, she also demonstrates competency, which is another key component of an I Want song.
So many stories start with the hero going on a mini-adventure that parallels the climax of the movie later.
She navigates the dangerous parts of the river, such as the rapids and the waterfall, showing that she is more than up to the task of navigating any unpredictable obstacle life throws at her, and she's actually welcoming this unpredictability. Another key component of an I Want song is likability, where we feel bonded to the character based on how well they bear their soul to us the viewer. We can feel Pocahontas' joy as she races along the rapids and appreciates every aspect of what a river can be, further emphasizing that she is someone who wants to live life to the fullest, as demonstrated earlier when she jumped off the cliff in joy at hearing that her father has returned home safely. And this means that we really feel it when the song's tempo changes, as Pocahontas has to reflect on what she would be giving up if she married Kocoum and did what her father told her would be best for the tribe. Kocoum isn't someone who she could do these same things with, so she would be suppressing her own personality to make others happy. And the fourth component is initiative, which means that a character will take it upon themselves to pursue what they want, rather than waiting around for it to happen, and they know the consequences that could result, but they're willing to accept them. So Pocahontas presents herself and the viewer with a choice. Should she choose the smoothest course and do what her father wanted, or should she choose the unpredictable path and follow her heart? And she makes that choice at the end of the song. And the final component is, what does the character need? And this isn't a want. Pocahontas wants to know what's coming and what her dream is about, and what she needs isn't necessarily romance, it's confirmation that she's doing the right thing, and essentially a sense of purpose.
What is my path? How am I ever going to find it?
She wants to know that following her heart isn't her being immature and selfish, but the morally correct path to take. And this foreshadows the ending of the film, where she is again presented with a difficult choice. And this time her father trusts her to make the right decision.
You must choose your own path.
So she also needs the freedom to make the choices that are right for her, and to be validated for doing that. So in this case, the romance isn't what solves the character's inner conflict, and it is a thing she gives up as part of that resolution, where everyone around her respects that she can't be with John, including the man himself, because there are more important things. So Just Around the River Bend is considerably more than just a token I Want song in there because every Disney lead needs one, or maybe considering the mehness of This Wish or Beyond, it's looking better by comparison. But anyway, Pocahontas' singing is dubbed by 3-time Tony nominee Judy Kuhn, who was brought on to sing the demos and told that she would also be the speaking voice if they couldn't find a Native American actress. Just Around the River Bend was also nearly dropped from the film because Disney execs didn't like it, and while Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz composed a replacement, they asked them to listen to a tweaked version and it was finally approved. They had a difficult time trying to find a way to start Pocahontas' story musically, because the film had to show that the Powhatans were living happy lives until the English showed up, but Pocahontas had to still want something and have motivations before John came into the picture. And it was Stephen Schwartz's wife Carol who suggested the dream. Since dreams are very important in Native American culture, they also took inspiration from Something's Coming from West Side Story, since Pocahontas was drawing from Romeo and Juliet and, you know. Anyway, the next song in the film is actually Irene Bedard's favourite, and that is Listen With Your Heart.
All around you are spirits, child.
After consulting with Grandmother Willow, Pocahontas is told that she has to start listening to the spirits around her and seek guidance from them, as they will ultimately provide the answers she wants. And I am just in love with the song's composition.
You will understand.
Everything else in the film has been up-tempo and a little bombastic, but here we have a quiet, contemplative number, and to achieve that, they composed it in the scale of G minor, specifically the natural minor, and to make it feel more meditative than the other songs, it uses a 5/4 time signature, meaning that the bar is made up of 5 quarter notes. Like, listen to this.
You will understand.
This time signature is less common than the usual 4/4, or 2/2, because the number of beats aren't a multiple of 2, but it is used whenever the music wants to evoke introspection. The song also uses flowing rhythms, where things like the repetition are unpredictable and irregular, to create the sense of movement, and indeed to evoke the flow of water and wind. And I was such a geek when I found this out, since the very thing Pocahontas appreciates about life is its unpredictability. The reprise comes later when John has finally seen Pocahontas, and the beat starts as soon as Pocahontas runs away, as if the spirits are telling her to stay. And the lyrics don't kick in until she has taken John's hand and gotten out of the canoe, in effect telling the spirits that she is ready to listen. This might be the most magical feeling song in the entire Disney animated canon.
Pocahontas.
What?
Next up we have Mine, 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 which is our villain song, and like the Virginia Company, it is a call to action, but now this song is diegetic and sung physically by Governor Ratcliffe, because we've now been put in the perspective of the main character, who is part of the tribe that this group are about to terrorize, and we know what will be disrupted and put at risk by the settlers now being here. So the song is inherently satirical.
Mine, mine, mine for the taking.
The pun is even there in the title, using mine to both mean physically mining for gold, and of course, it's all mine. Now this is probably my least favourite song in the film, and that might be because of some of the lyrics, like rhyming got in ya with Virginia, but I do like the instrumentation, which is very British pomp, and David Ogden Stiers does excellent voice work.
All of the gold is mine.
In fact, although he did the voices for multiple Disney characters, I think this was the first time he got a whole song to himself. It's also important to note that Ratcliffe is sometimes misremembered or misrepresented as being simply motivated by greed, and this song spells it out that he's not so much looking to get rich, but rather after the status he'll get from being the one who finds gold in America.
I'm very well aware that this is my last chance for glory.
It's said in this exchange with Wiggins that he's not well liked at court, and he's considered a pathetic social climber, so the gold is a means to an end, that being rising through the ranks and hopefully being honoured by King James. And remember glory, God and gold? Claiming control of a territory strengthened your country's position in European politics, so he's hoping for honours and rewards for doing something for his country. And there's mention of the court ladies fawning over him, so he's hoping for an advantageous marriage as well. And for all the complaints that this movie sanitizes history or tries to avoid making white Americans uncomfortable, take a look at the map here, which shows the destruction that happened to the Incas and the Aztecs, not exactly ignoring the loss of life caused by this search for treasure. This isn't a white savior movie, it's a white guilt movie. And the second part of the song also functions as something of an I Want song for John Smith. And it's not an accident that it happens within the main villain song, because John is still on the side of the antagonists at the time. His motivations are different from Ratcliffe's though, in that he's more interested in adventure and making his mark on the world, making it a kind of foil to Just Around the River Bend, since both him and Pocahontas have a desire for adventure, but Pocahontas is appreciative of how life is its own adventure, and she welcomes whatever it brings, whereas John wants something to tame just to say he did it. essentially seeing this trip as a chance to flex. So he's still morally aligned with Ratcliffe, even if he doesn't have the exact same motivations. And surprisingly enough, Mel Gibson does his own singing, and not too shabby at all.
A man can be born.
And while it's my least favourite song, I do have to say, I love the contrasting solos towards the end.
This land we behold, this beauty untold.
But then, oh boy.
Can you paint with all the colors of the wind?
No biggie, just my favourite Disney song of all time, and probably my number one out of all musical numbers in existence. Colours of the Wind was actually the first song written for the film, and it was a huge influence on how the rest of the story developed, though there was already a storyboard outline in place. Stephen Schwartz wanted to have a moment where Pocahontas confronted John Smith about his Eurocentric beliefs and just challenged his views.
What you mean is, not like you.
For his research on the film, he visited the Jamestown Museum and attended a gathering of Native American tribes, as well as just immersing himself in both the time period and culture, buying several tapes of music to listen to, as well as history books, novels by native authors, and collections of poetry, which was a big influence on the specific wording of the lyrics in Colours of the Wind. And the often questioned phrase, blue corn moon, comes from a line in a poem he read referring to the moon of green corn. Native Americans traditionally referred to the months as moons, and named them according to something seasonal. So the line was originally, have you ever heard the wolf cry to the green corn moon? But it was changed to blue because the E sound in green didn't have the same effect, and conjured up thoughts of green cheese. And blue was in reference to the phrase, once in a blue moon, which he admits is less authentic and closer to the southwestern tribes. He also took inspiration from what at the time was believed to be a famous letter written by Chief Seattle to the US Congress in 1854, with the song's title coming from this paradoxical passage, but sadly the letter's validity was later debunked. The song's lyrics that every rock and tree and creature has its own spiritual essence come from animism, which isn't an organised religion, and more of a metaphysical belief that is shared by many indigenous cultures. And so while the song partly furthers the relationship between Pocahontas and John Smith, its primary function is to convey that the Powhatans' belief system and way of life is just as valid and worthy of respect. Remember that Virginia Company had that repeated use of glory, God, and gold, and Ratcliffe refers to the Powhatans as heathens?
Make sure those filthy heathens don't disrupt our mission.
Pocahontas is arguing on behalf of her people to someone who believed them inferior and in need of being shown a better way of life. Lyrics that really stick out to me are, how high does the sycamore grow? If you cut it down, then you'll never know. Referring to the fact that colonialism and cultural extinction means that we'll never know how other cultures and civilizations could have evolved naturally. And indeed, so much of Powhatan culture itself is lost to history because of it. And the song is significant for Pocahontas' character because remember how she has been shown to be somewhat apart from the rest of her tribe? It's after this song that we see Pocahontas being more involved with the rest of her community. This song is also Pocahontas coming to that realization of what she was searching for back in Just Around the Riverbend. The spirits gave her the tools she needed in Listen With Your Heart, and she realizes her purpose, with Colours of the Wind functioning as her now teaching a lesson rather than learning one, and imparting the knowledge she's been given. She convinces one person to change his views, foreshadowing that she is capable of getting people to see a different way, setting up that she will appeal to her father as a daughter to resolve the conflict without violence. And it's this that makes John fall in love with her. He is in awe of this passionate young woman who bears her soul to him about everything she believes in, and he's attracted to her bravery and maturity, which helps him realize that he's been living a lie. And the song escalates to such an emotional high because it has to not just put John and Pocahontas on the same page, but bring John to the point where he goes, I cannot be part of this any longer and I will go against my own people if I have to, not just because I love this woman, but because everything I've done has been wrong and it's time to start doing the right thing. And the song symbolically ends on this shot of the helmet and musket being left aside to show how John has abandoned his beliefs. It is in no way subtle, but it doesn't need to be. And you can imagine how annoyed I get when people try to reduce it to a generic preachy song about respecting the environment, but to each their own. And the composition. Alan Menken later called it one of the most important songs he'd ever written. It was born out of the modality of Native American music, but quickly moved to its own place, which is hard to define. The grand, slow elegance. It's a very serious song, but there was no getting humour into Pocahontas. God knows we tried. They were initially sure that Disney would reject the song for being too philosophical and so different from previous Disney songs, but Judy Kuhn sang the demo for them, and they approved it. They also screened the song and 10 additional minutes of unfinished animation for Ray Adams, who is chairman of the United Indians of Virginia, to make sure they were on the right track and not enforcing stereotypes. And he too approved it, specifically that Pocahontas was shown as very beautiful and intelligent and very loving, which the Native Americans are. We aren't usually portrayed as being loving. Add that to a spectacular animated sequence that works in tandem with a great song, and doesn't nerf the music for the sake of visuals. Hint hint, John Lasseter, and hello, my favourite Disney song of all time. And as an aside, do check out this fantastic version by Raimi Salazar, and funnily enough, this scene originally ended with John Smith being shirtless, which I guess makes it a little more suggestive, but okay. And we don't get another song for literally the next 20 minutes. There was a romantic duet scripted for the meeting shortly before Cocoam attacks, which takes inspiration from another West Side Story song, this one being Somewhere, and was born out of Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz feeling that they needed a light-hearted up-tempo song like Under the Sea or Be Our Guest, so the closest candidate was In the Middle of the River, which was storyboarded but never animated. And while I like the idea of it in isolation, giving Pocahontas and John a song to properly affirm that they're in love and let them have their happiness before it's taken away, it doesn't really fit with the tone they were going for, and I'm not sure about having an upbeat song right before Cocoam is killed. I'm not saying the Miko and Percy stuff is tonally consistent, but for the most part, I think the way the scene plays out in the finished film works as is, so cutting the song was the right call. There was another candidate called First to Dance, which was born out of the want to give Grandmother Willow a song, and they composed several, with this one being considered the best.
Someone has to start the dancing.
I like it a little bit more than In the Middle of the River, and I think it probably could have worked, but again, Grandmother Willow gets John on the same page with these lines just fine, so maybe the song would have been extraneous.
Young man, sometimes the right path is not the easiest one.
The next deleted song, however,
If I never knew you.
We were supposed to have another duet titled If I Never Knew You, which was going to be so integral to the movie that its tune is interwoven throughout the rest of the score.
Cocoam was just coming to protect me. Pocahontas.
And it was animated, but cut after a couple of test screenings where it was, to use Stephen Schwartz's words, straining the attention span of the younger viewers and slowing storytelling too close to the end of the film. And cutting it was a mutual decision by everyone, rather than on The Little Mermaid, where Howard Ashman threatened to quit if they cut part of your world. He's also said, sometimes songs work best out of context than in the show where they were originally intended, and I go back and forth on this, because I absolutely love the instrumental piece I'll Never See Him Again that plays over the scene in the finished film, which uses the musical cues from If I Never Knew You, and the way the violins go at this part sells the heartbreak so brilliantly. And in the version with I Never Knew You restored, you lose that, so it doesn't play the same way. I also don't know about the montage in the middle of it because it's very cheesy 2000s fan-made YouTube video, which I totally did not make plenty of myself. No, not at all. But at the same time...
But still my heart is saying we were right.
And more importantly, John has not sung in the film since Mine, 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 where he was morally aligned with the people he has now turned against in favour of his love for Pocahontas. And while we can kinda get his state of mind from the film anyway, the song makes what is implied much clearer, with him thanking Pocahontas for everything she's done for him, and reassuring her that he wouldn't have had things any other way. And I love the detail that he puts on a brave face for her, trying to make her feel better about what's going to happen, but as soon as she leaves, we get that moment of vulnerability.
And I'm so grateful to you.
And the song also allows Pocahontas to be vulnerable, since she had spent the film being the more dominant partner who was usually confident and in control, so the song allows her to go to pieces for a bit, where John provides that need for Pocahontas to know she made the right choice, and her choosing to not follow the smoothest course was ultimately a good thing because of what she did for him. And I am just in love with this beautifully tragic callback to Just Around the Riverbend. So ultimately I'm like, yeah, include the song, but find a way to incorporate the instrumentation for I'll Never See Him Again, and maybe don't use the montage in the middle. Stephen Schwartz came up with the song by writing out a monologue, or list of things from John's perspective about what Pocahontas meant to him, and Alan Menken went through the monologue and picked out the phrase, "If I never knew you," and thus they had their title.
I'd rather die tomorrow than live 100 years without knowing you.
Then we get the not at all controversial Savages, which we could argue is our real villain song, where Radcliffe takes advantage of John's impending execution to rally the rest of the English into attacking the Powhatans with full force, and the Powhatans in turn preparing for the war that'll inevitably start when John is killed.
We must sound the drums of war.
And let me tell you, there is not a single song in the Disney animated canon that was more heavily scrutinized before the movie was ever released. In fact, I'd argue that Pocahontas was in a position similar to this year's Snow White remake, where there were calls for boycotts and condemnations, and Savages was right at the centre of it, since people were definitely worried about songs in G-rated musicals using words that have historically been used to degrade the group being portrayed. Although, as I uncovered in my research years ago for another video, there were people who argued that teaching children how to identify the signs of racism and recognise how it develops could be very educational. But of course, some lyrics had to be changed for the film's release, but the original ones still appear on the soundtrack. One of them was changed from Dirty Red-Skinned Devils to Dirty Shrieking Devils, which is fine, the original went too far. Then there was the weird Let's Go Kill a Few Men changed to Let's Go Get a Few Men. And the big one is, here's what you get when races are diverse, changed from, their whole disgusting race is like a curse. The original one there was more powerful, and the changed one is a bit on the nose and not in a good way, and the original served the song's intent, which was to show that the English were the instigators acting on prejudice alone, since we know Radcliffe is exploiting things for his own gain, and the Powhatans are just reacting understandably to the side that fired first. And all that being said, I can't get on board with the take of, say, Lindsay Ellis, whose work I otherwise have loved and followed over the years, and yet she insists the song is trying to go, look, the white guys weren't that bad, when to me it's clearly showing the destructive power of hatred and prejudice, and how that can be easily weaponized by someone who wants to profit from it. And while I think that the Menken Schwartz team produced a much stronger dark song in Hellfire, I still think Savages is very bold, and definitely something current Disney wouldn't dare try, which is a little sad. They took inspiration from Rodgers and Hammerstein, specifically the song You've Got to Be Carefully Taught from South Pacific, which for the time was a very radical story about racial tolerance.
I do not believe it is born in you.
And all that aside, David Ogden Stiers sings the hell out of it. People are so focused on pulling random lines out of context to make fun of, but I think his voice work as Radcliffe goes very underappreciated, especially in this song, where his vocals mix with the music for a genuinely chilling portrayal of sheer hate, and the animation accompanying the sequence is just spectacular. The colours and the overall scene composition. The lyrics may be a little defanged, but the sequence is not lacking in power, and I respect that they took a big swing. And this is one of the few Disney musicals to actually have a song in the third act, which I always appreciate. And here, Pocahontas does something that I wish The Princess and the Frog had done, since both have climaxes that involve saving other characters, and a big issue I have with the latter is that it's supposed to be Tiana's story, and yet the movie is constantly taking the focus off the main character to make things all about everybody else. And even when Tiana has just had a big emotional beat involving giving up the dream she's worked her whole life for, and accepting that because she'll still have love, the movie yanks the attention away from the main character to make it all about the death of an animal's sidekick. And the song she does get is a non-diegetic one that doesn't really put us in her perspective the way I would have liked. Pocahontas likewise has a third act where the other characters are doing something, but the narrative is constantly circling back to centre her.
You have to stop them.
I can't.
Savages happens, and then we get her reaction to what's about to go down, because it's her story, and what she feels matters most. And the main tension becomes, will she stop the execution, because she's the only one who can save everyone? Princess and the Frog does give Tiana something by having her destroy the talisman and bring Facilier down, but I think the last part of the movie could have used a song that's led by her, and properly centers her in the narrative to make everything all about her again. Here, Savages stops so that Pocahontas can react and make a decision, and then the reprise starts so that she can join it, because the song was not complete without the main character. And there's even more West Side Story influence, in this case the quintet version of Tonight, building to a conflict between two factions. And this is just so epic. The way it builds and builds and then suddenly just stops as Pocahontas throws herself between John and her father. Such a perfect sequence. And the 10th anniversary edition restores a brief reprise of If I Never Knew You as Pocahontas and John say goodbye, which I don't really feel. It's a lot like the fan-composed reprises of Do You Want to Build a Snowman sung by Elsa to Anna while she's frozen. Having the characters sing would take away from the emotion of the scene as is, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like what I was taught in screenwriting. If you can accomplish everything with 2 lines rather than 5, why are you writing 5? And the scene is still responding musically to a previous song in the film, in this case, Colours of the Wind. The instrumental track Farewell functions as a bittersweet reprise of that without words. That's not to say I don't like adding in that reprise of If I Never Knew You. It's a fun addition to the true version, and I could go on for days about how perfect this ending is, and the music is a big part of that.
Good luck, lad. Godspeed, John.
Farewell might be my favourite instrumental track in a Disney movie, and it never fails to prompt the full spectrum of human emotion anytime I watch the whole thing or listen to it on its own. And then the end credits has the pop version of If I Never Knew You by Shanice and John Cicada, which is one of the rare times I wholeheartedly dig the pop cover of a movie song, and this version is just as good, and may have spent several hours being sung by me whenever my house was empty. I have less warmth towards the pop version of Colours of the Wind. Sorry, Vanessa.
Once I called you brother.
And there we have it. 30 years. And it feels like just yesterday I was reading about the 10th anniversary and adding Steady as the Beating Drum to my iPod. I remember a YouTube comment that expressed appreciation for this era of Disney in ways that I was struggling to for ages. Specifically, when there were ugly and beautiful characters, where the scenery was crafted by human hands and every frame was art, where the music moved your heart. And while I was in the process of writing the script for this video, I heard all about the apparent soullessness of the Lilo and Stitch remake, and so I'm just going to focus on the things we love even more.
But I can't leave you.
You never will. No matter what happens, I'll always be with you.
Pocahontas may not have gotten that Best Picture nomination Jeffrey Katzenberg so coveted. He'd actually left Disney before it was even released. But it still won 2 Academy Awards, both for its score overall, and Best Original Song for What Else? And extremely well deserved. It really can't have been easy for Stephen Schwartz to have to step in as the songwriter who had to follow Howard Ashman, and while I won't deny that the soundtrack doesn't have the exact cultural staying power as The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast, this pairing of him and Alan Menken produced something that we're still gushing about 30 years later, and next year will be the 30th anniversary of Hunchback of Notre Dame, where they knocked it out of the park once again, and created one of the most underrated Disney soundtracks of all time, A Guy Like You aside. And this year, we'll also be welcoming the second part of one of the best movie musical adaptations we've seen in years, also penned by one of these guys. So Stephen Schwartz has come a long way from answering a phone call from the Walt Disney Company in 1991 when he decided he was done with musicals and was studying to become a therapist, and likewise from thinking that he was all wrong for the job and being sure they'd laugh him out of the building when he pitched something that ended up winning an Oscar and becoming my favourite Disney song of all time. This film, of course, was not for everyone, but it was for me, and to me, it's a masterpiece, and I've been helped through some very difficult times by its existence, as I'm sure multiple other people have. So, happy 30th birthday. I've never stopped celebrating. And again, in the name of not ending things on a depressing note, as well as shameless cross-promotion, I'm delighted to unveil the cover for my next book, Joanna and the 12 Crowns, a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale that I like to describe as if Guillermo del Toro made Once Upon a Time. Credit for the artwork can go to the amazing Harley Cubberley, who also designed the cover for The Shallow Ocean. More updates very, very soon.